What is up, family? Hope everybody is doing well. I'm here with a very cool, very unique special guest today. It's my Pokemon expert, the Analytic Gengar, Ryan from this beautiful channel. We've been chatting for, quite a few months now, and this guy just knows everything about Pokemon. He's a huge collector. He's been doing this, for a big part of his life. And I wanted to kind of grab him here today and see if we can kind of, make any inferences based on his physical collecting knowledge and then how that could affect, the prices of our VeVe investments long term, and to see if we can kind of draw any kind of insight or conclusions from this conversation. So yeah, Ryan, thanks so much for being here today, man.
No worries, Chad. Thanks for having me. And hey, everyone. Hope everyone's having a great day. Over on my channel, I'd say my name is Ryan, and this is the Analytic Gengar.
Love it, man. And I'm like a huge fanboy. So I was telling Ryan before, I do a lot of interviews, but like I was just like over the moon excited that you wanted to, to do this and kind of cross pollinate these two fields, so to speak. So yeah, man. I mean, so how long you been collecting for?
Oh boy. At this point, I'm old enough to say that it's an embarrassing amount of time, but probably something close to like 19, 20 years. So I'm 27 now. I think I got my first pack when I was like 6, and it was love at first pack, as they say.
Wow. That is, that's quite some time, right? And you've seen all the ebbs and flows, you've seen the downs and ups.
Yeah, absolutely. You know everything from like the initial like what are pocket monsters all the way through to like okay, Harry Potter's cool now, so we don't care about Pokemon anymore, all the way up to like the 2016 craziness. Obviously, the past couple of years have just been their own era. So it's been fun to kind of watch the hobby grow and shape and take form. And I can certainly see how like there is cross pollination happening, right? Because obviously a new type of collectible is now emerging, and I'm super excited because you can see sort of the rhyming that's occurring between the two in terms of history.
Wow. Well said, man. And over this course of time, like what do you feel like how much money have you made if you don't mind me asking? Like how like what are the gains? Is that like a 2x, 3x, like a 1.5? Like what are we looking at?
I mean, I'm willing to conservatively say that over the past 3 years, which I can really kind of isolate to like the time that I have done this for the raw intention of investment, I have spent something close to about 70 to $100,000.
Wow.
I'm currently sitting on my collection a little bit, which we'll see a little bit of today in the video. But of that, I think my collection's conservatively worth about $500,000 now. So I've seen about a 5 times gain. And obviously, much of that is unrealized because it just sits in my collection. But when you think about how little I've spent, right,
Wow.
the cost basis to profit potential, I think is something that's really interesting and very unique, specifically to um, collectibles, right? The other thing to bear in mind is note that I said the past 3 years, right? Can't do that in the stock market.
No kidding. No
Yeah.
kidding. And it's real money. Like that's the thing too, is like, you can sell this. Where would you sell it if ideally? Like would it be on eBay and those places? If you or do you have your own site for it? How would that work?
I mean, the funniest part of all is that you have many different options available to you. So nowadays, anybody can get a YouTube page, right? We've seen the rise of several very popular not YouTube pages, eBay pages that have
Yeah.
popped up over maybe the past 5 years, right? And they're very robust sellers in the Pokemon community. There's tons of Facebook pages that obviously are buy and selling communities. And then obviously, sometimes I prefer the old fashioned way, and I found that to be my most successful is either a private sale or a semi-public sale with a collector of some sort, right? So I've
Wow.
done business with folks like PokeRev, I've done business with folks like TCA Gaming across various platforms. So I look at it also as one of the ways to enjoy the hobby, because part of it is like what we're doing right now, right? Sitting, talking, just kind of enjoying each other's mutual interests and the concentric circles of our hobbies and interests. That's part of what's always made collecting Pokemon and or collectibles in general a very rewarding thing to do.
Right. Wow. Very, very cool, man. And in the world of NFTs, it's insane the kind of trajectory and profits that we've seen in only 1 year or less.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
s- so it's funny because, like a 5x, anybody that would get a 5x is like, you know, amazed. But on VeVe, we've seen like in some instances like 100x, if not like a 200x. And people don't realize that that's, you know, literally never happens. Like it's exceptionally rare. And so, you know, it's just interesting because, you know, I didn't invest as much money into Pokemon as you. I do have, you know, a small background into that, but you know, it's just incredible that, you know, we see these insane gains in the NFT world. And in VeVe, a lot of people are still like disappointed. They're like, oh, it only went up 5 times, or only, you know, I bought it for $30 and it's only $200 today. So I just wanted to share that with you because, you know, the NFT realm right now, it's a very crazy world, you know. But so with that, Ryan, you know, I was watching a lot of your videos, man, and I was obsessed with some of the heavy hitters that you have. And I was really hoping today that, you know, if you wouldn't mind, if you could share potentially, you know, some of the big cards that you have in your collection.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to go ahead and pop my video on. This should look familiar if any of my viewers
Yes.
listen to me and come on over. So I wanted to start off by saying that I recently did do 2 videos where I show my top 5 favorite slash most expensive PSA graded cards, as well as one for my booster box collection. So I brought some of those to show today as a little bit of a repeat, but then of course I did also bring some new ones that are going to be exclusive to this video. So you guys are getting a sneak peek. I'm trying to hook the community up with a real sneak peek into what one of these like super hyper expensive trading card collections might look like, right? So here are, of course, got to start it off well, right, with the original 3. These are my first edition base set Charizard, Blastoise, and Venusaur from base set, right? So these are the OGs. These are, I guess, what would be the equivalent of some of the first edition and first appearance NFTs that are out there, right? These are some of the most iconic ones. Obviously, these are all PSA 5, but I wanted to share a funny story that I thought was super interesting. I actually bought those cards back in 2013, and I bought them all raw on eBay. So none of them were actually ever intended to be PSA 5s. They just all graded PSA 5 by coincidence.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
pretty solid, right? That you have like the 3 across the board and they're all shadowless too, right? Would that be implied with first edition or no?
Yep,
Yeah.
absolutely. So just as an example, if we take a look at this, the first edition stamp would be this little circle right here.
Yeah.
And it quite literally has a 1 and it says first edition. And then the shadowless would be right over here. So this border, you'll notice, is abnormally exposed. And the reason that is because in other Pokemon cards, they would have been shadowed. But for all first edition cards, they also happen to be non-shadowed. So by saying first edition, it's first edition shadowless, and that's always implied. There are shadowed versions of the card as well. So in later print runs, WotC got their ish together and kind of decided to, like, you know, more standardly print the stuff. But at the very beginning, they were prone to making errors. And one of those errors was that what was the exclusion of the shadow on these cards.
Beautiful, man.
Yeah.
And Ryan, while I got you there, I was going to ask you this later, but I think it's just, you know, an important question. Like, how many of the first edition Shadowlist like were printed in relevant proportion to like just like normal, let's say, holographic Charizard base set, you know, Venusaur and Blastoise? Like, maybe you don't have that exact ratio, but like, you know, because I know it's a lot more expensive than just your typical base set Charizard, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So these cards, because they're first edition, carry a significant premium to them. What's funny is that there are literally hundreds of data projects that exist that basically attempt to answer that question that you just asked, right? They're basically saying, hey, can we somehow back into the number of how many of these were ever printed? There's a genuine belief by what I would call some of the most reputable folks in the hobby, right? Folks who were probably adults at the time and were also you know, very aware of what was going on. They say about 10% of the cards that were ever printed for any of the sets were going to end up being stamped with the first edition stamp. Then they put the stamp away, they printed everything else as unlimited.
Wow.
The problem with that statement is that we still don't have the total number. So Pokemon is very, very secretive about the total number of cards that got printed, right? So the percentage without the total is basically useless information. That's where I think, and I think this is where, you know, something like VeVe comes into play really, really well, is because I think something this particular hobby of collectibles has that my hobby doesn't is like an empirical number tagged to any different item, right? So I was watching one of your videos the other day where you mentioned like a Harley Quinn first appearance, and I'm a big fan of Harley Quinn, by the way. I literally have my miniature Funko Pop that I keep on me at all times.
Sick.
But what's funny is that like I like immediately perked up because I was like, oh, that's so dope. But you know, you guys will always be able to say, hey, there's only 600 of these. Unless this gets graded by PSA, BGS, or CGC, I don't know how many exist. And the funniest part of all is that if I broke this card out of this slab, the population report is already erroneous. So even that, you know, really doesn't mean much if you consider how many different things can occur to a graded Pokemon card. One of the benefits, I think, of something like VeVe is that you'll have that number that is empirically tied to supply. And I think that's a very powerful thing when you're trying to estimate something like price or potential price in the future.
Right. And does it ever detract big investors from making significant investments into Pokemon because they're not aware of that empirical data, so to speak? Because it's like if you're making a $50,000 purchase, let's just say on a, I don't know, like a PSA 7, first edition Shadowless Charizard, or maybe that'd be a PSA 8 or 9, but nonetheless, but like, would that be something that you in your experience may deter people, or is that kind of irrelevant?
The one thing that I have seen is that for any graded Pokemon card, and I'm going to pull a few more up on screen just so we're looking at something too.
Yeah.
One of the things is like each of these trading cards that you're seeing on screen and all of the ones that exist out there in the world, each of them is going to have a population report tied to it, right? So as long as you're buying a graded trading card, you'll always have that population report that's going to tell you there are X amount that are graded in a particular number.
Mm.
So that's usually how a graded Pokemon card would be assessed based on its, subjective rarity, because we can look at the population report and we can take the time to sort of evaluate like, hey, of the total percent of cards that are graded, so and so percentage are PSA 10s. As a result, there might be 10% of all cards graded for this particular Pokemon card or 10s. Therefore, it carries a little bit more of a premium because it's rare. So again, that's how we kind of use the pseudoscience of percentages and mathematics to kind of back into a prescribed rarity, as opposed to like, an NFT on the market today that comes with a standard number, right? Edition 1 of 200 or limited edition 1 of 600 or something of the sort.
Right. Wow, very that's great insight, Rye. And
Yep.
I guess like what other factors would make you kind of take the leap and go and purchase a card? Like what kind of things do you look for? Because obviously there's a lot of people that may have collected just as much as you but didn't see a 5x. Maybe they saw maybe they saw a negative return, like, or maybe they saw a 2x. But in your experience, like what factors are you looking for? Like, are you buying singles? Are you chasing booster boxes? Like what does that look like?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I can actually talk through my answer with some of the cards, right? So
Sweet.
I'll pull this guy back up on screen. This is a Space Fissures Deoxys. What's cool about this card is that it's a lenticular, so you can see it's kind of like changing as you go, right? Sometimes it can quite literally be as simple as that. It's something weird, it's something quirky. Obviously, of all the cards I've shown so far on screen, no other ones have been lenticular cards. And this card was actually a movie promo. So there's a bit of history behind this card, right? And I think that sometimes plays into the uniqueness of an item that determines its relative collectability, right? Like this is a card that you don't see too many of, and not a lot of people know about it, right? But for the folks who do know about it, it's almost like a nod of respect because it's like, hey, you're really that into it that you kind of go down the rabbit hole, right?
Right.
Here are 3 EX era Gem Mint 10 EX Team Rocket Returns holos, right? So
Ah,
these are the ultra rares from the set. I've picked these up kind of, randomly over the years, just kind of attempting to collect more. One thing that I do know, right? So like these two, they're just I hate to say it like this, but they're kind of regular, right? They're just like they're very nice, pristine copies, and sometimes you buy it because it's rare or because of its condition, right? So that's something that we can also evaluate. One other thing is that sometimes there are differentiating factors. So I'm trying to get this on camera for you, but right over here, you can see right where my left thumb is, there's a little swirl on that card.
yeah.
And something like that, right, is a unique element of this card that kind of gives it its own unique fingerprint, right? It kind of be like if if a limited edition collectible ended in something like 420 or 69, right? Those are the classic examples I give. But you know, sometimes we see like even cert numbers that have like a funny pattern to them, like 525252. That card is a junk card, but it carries a premium because the cert number is you know, funny. This is a very pretty card, right? So that's one of the reasons that I would buy it. And I know for a semi creepy but similar reason, there's been a big surge in waifu cards, right? So anytime there's a waifu printed on a full art trainer or something of the sort, people go through the effort of buying, you know, cards that they find attractive for one reason or the other. You know, I've made note. I love water type Pokemon, and I think they just look really good on cards. So this is an example of that. And other times, you know, and this is like my most, you know, classic example. It's just raw rarity, right? So like here are 3 Gem Mint 10 Gold Star cards, and these are just like for funsies, right? Like, but like over time you like acquire things that are either rare or highly sought after, and you know, you notice, but like Mewtwo, right? Like I think everybody remembers Mewtwo from the original movie, right? Groudon, a legendary Pokemon, right? So another classic example of something everyone had to see playing through the video games. And then Jolteon, right? The electric type Pokemon that Eevee evolves into. Anyone who played the original video games knows about this Pokemon. And then there are other times where you go after quote unquote big hitters, right? So kind of as you mentioned, like these are some of my most valuable cards. And one of the things that I always think about is like Rayquaza is genuinely one of the first dragon type Pokemon we really saw. Fun fact about this card, it's not the first appearance of Rayquaza, but it is the most expensive Rayquaza. Why is that? Because it's a gold star. So these are just some of the examples of cards that, you know, for one reason or the other, whether it be beauty, aesthetic, raw rarity, anything of the sort, you know, they carry a pretty significant price premium to them. To answer your question from just a little whiles ago too, I do have other collectibles in my collection, right? So I believe in like varying. If anyone has noticed a theme as of yet, it's that I'm a big EX era collector, and you know, I've really kind of chosen to hyper focus my collection on that, because this is the era when I was growing up that I could really remember playing and trading and having fun and enjoying the cards. So here's my EX Fire Red and Leaf Green box that I definitely didn't show on my channel as of recent. Here is here's one from the video that I mentioned earlier. So this is a Crystal Guardians box. A very popular because of Charizard. Obviously, I see several Charizards actually in your background. So, you know, I guess we're twinsies now. Here's an EX Unseen Forces one. So this is another one of those boxes like highly sought after for a variety of reasons. It has a Lugia in it, which is another very expensive card. And then I'm just gonna drop in my EX Dragon, and of course, the big hitter of the day, the $60,000 EX Deoxys booster box. Why is it popular? Because you have a 1 in 6 booster box chance of pulling this guy. And this guy's about a $40,000 card as of its most recent sale price.
So we're looking at just if we can see those two up together. Yeah.
Yeah,
so that right there, folks, is like almost like the equivalency of like an Audi R8, like just in your
more or less.
hands.
Yeah. Not
That's
even fully loaded,
insane.
I think.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
wild.
So
Wow.
we'll leave those in the background.
Man, I'm happy to see those. And I was funny because you know I didn't want to kill your thunder because I was going to ask you, hey man, do you mind putting that $40,000 card back on screen? But so you know, I mean, first of all, thanks so much for showing you know like a really cool aspects of your collection here. I mean, everybody's going to freak out when they see this. But one thing that you said that was super interesting was that Rayquaza is not like the first time that it was printed, right? This is like another print run. And what about that card, I guess, distinguishes itself from the first? Is it just pure scarcity? And that's the reason that it's more important because it's a gold star and they only ever did one gold star Rayquaza. Is that really the major factor?
So there have been tons of different Rayquazas printed. I believe the first one ever printed was out of this set right here. So it was an EX card and it looked very similar to the ones I had on screen. You know, it had like the uber holographic background and, you know, EX as a kind of tailing to it. So they then introduced, starting with the EX Team Rocket Return set, the Gold Star cards. So these Gold Star cards came with another special caveat, and that's that they have this little weird gold star at the back of them. And you're only allowed one of these in your deck at a given time. In every set that came out, so Crystal Guardians, Unseen Forces, Deoxys, and a bunch of other ones, they started putting in 1, 2, or 3 gold star cards that you could pull out. Interestingly enough, this card has a very, very difficult history to it, because this card, when it came out, was very playable in the Pokemon TCG. And obviously, you jump on YouTube, you see a lot of folks talking about vintage Pokemon collectibles. They forget that at one point, this was on a store shelf somewhere, right? And what's hilarious about that is that kids were pulling this card, putting it in their pocket, and going to school with it. Those cards, you don't want to see those cards anymore. Kids were pulling this card back in the day, right? Like, this is probably the most notorious card that kids went to school with and played on the playground with. Like, I can't imagine rubbing this card against asphalt. I'd rather have my face rubbed against asphalt instead of this card nowadays, right? And then another really interesting thing about this card is that, you're right, scarcity played a big role in it. All of the cards and the booster boxes that I have on screen right now, a lot of this stuff came from an era in Pokemon when interest was at its lowest point. So this is all from the 3rd generation of Pokemon cards. And if I can briefly go into the history, during generations 1 and 2, the hype was at its highest, right? We had the original base set, we had Charizard, we had generation 2, we had Lugia. I'm sure everybody remembers the Pokemon 2000 movie with Lugia and Ash and the 3 birds and all that kind of fun stuff. And then right around 2002, which is when the first EX era set began getting printed, Pokemon noted a very vapid decline in demand for their product. And part of the reason for that was because people were growing up, right? So, you and I might have been kids on the playground back in 1999 when this stuff came out. But by the time it was 2000, 2001, 2, or 3, there were other cooler things that we could do, right? So we could watch Harry Potter instead of this, right? Or like our little sisters like Pokemon all of a sudden, so we didn't like it. So Pokemon genuinely declined, and there wasn't a lot of interest. I think it's really interesting because that's one of the things that I mentioned earlier about how history tends to rhyme across hobbies. Not to say not to say that there isn't a genuine interest in NFTs and particularly collectibles in the space, but I think what's interesting is that we may historically, in retrospect, be seeing the time when interest was at its lowest, because up till now, a lot of people scoff at the idea of like, oh, a digital collectible, I can't hold it in my hand. Like, I can tell you everything you're seeing on screen, I do not keep in my house for a variety of reasons, but primarily, like, I don't hold these things in my hand every day, right? So like, the idea that you don't hold it in your hand, although viable, doesn't necessarily mean that it isn't something we can collect. And I think that's one of the most powerful things to bear in mind, is that, everything has its low point, right? This stuff included. And nowadays, as you mentioned, I technically have more than an Audi R8 sitting on my desk right now.
Right. Insane. Man, first of all, we need you in this community, dude. You're so smart. I feel like I could learn so much. And it's just so interesting that you're saying this, because right now we're seeing a bit of a low point in VeVe. Like, we went from this huge spike in January, and prices went like almost like 3 to 10x to almost in everything, and then now they've receded in some areas like almost like 80%, and so people are kind of losing faith. But what I'm learning here is, like, not to say that it's a guaranteed thing, but if you are courageous and are looking for those big hitters, so to speak, in a time where the interest is low, then long term there could be a great opportunity there, when there might be a re-spiraling of interest into NFTs, as an example, right? So I think that's super interesting. And one thing I actually wanted to ask you too was about the chances of pulling some of these cards. So I watched one of your videos. You were in the back in the day saying, in a base set you can pull a Charizard. It was like 1 in 48 packs, and then it was like 1 in 200 and something packs for Rayquaza, and then it just kept getting harder and harder. And you showed a secret rare Umbreon full art, and you said, like, this is almost 1 in 2,000 chance. And on VeVe, we kind of all participate in this drop system, and only, you know, a certain percentage of people actually get the drop, and then even smaller percentage gets the card, or rather the NFT, that would be like real valuable or could be real valuable long term. So it'd be interesting to kind of play that a little bit and see, you know, see what your chances are nowadays to get something good in a current booster box compared to back then.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I think one of the things we've seen in the Pokemon trading card game hobby is this escalation of rarity. And just as an example, right, back in the day, this was the card you wanted to pull. And by the card, I mean a holographic card was the bare, you know, was the only thing that you actually wanted to pull. It was about a 1 in 3 shot. So every 3 packs you opened up, the you know, the seeding was that you'd get about 1 holo per 3 packs, about 12 per booster box. Charizard in specific would be about 48, right? So they specifically made it such that it was a little bit more difficult to pull than some of the other holographics. By the time we get to the third generation, we end up in a position where we're now sitting at gold star cards, right? We're sitting at EX cards, both of which are now being treated as ultra rare premium cards that you can pull. And then you still have the holographic cards. Nowadays, you know, without getting too much into it, I know fans of your channel also heard this because of a video you did recently. You know, you're gonna pull 5 or 6 cards out of a modern booster box, or like, you know, one of these, you're gonna, you know, you're not really gonna get much, right? If you pull that Charizard, if you pull that alternate art, that's really what you care about. And I think if we're, you know, if I'm gauging the way that I can see that rhyming out, is that I think, you know, just think about how these cards are, right? A PSA 10 of this card is a $20,000 card now, right? It was a lot easier to pull this card than it was to pull this card, than it was to pull this Charizard. And the
Mhm.
funniest part of all is that because of the escalation in popularity that you're seeing across the screen from right to left, these cards will always carry a significantly more large premium than these
Mhm.
cards. And ironically enough, these were easier to pull, right? So in theory, the early adopters are the ones who benefit the most, because they will consistently become the, you know, the whales of the community, so to say. Another interesting thing that I think is really cool is that, you know, it's a very simple and easy to understand system on VeVe, I think, because you
Yeah.
know, I've downloaded the app separately of our conversation. But what I think is really neat is that it's like, you know, a 1 in 10 chance at an uncommon, or a 1 in 10 chance at one of the animated ones, right? I think that's cool because it's just a very simple and easy way to understand, as opposed to like me and you trying to explain to the majority, like, oh, it's an alternate art VMAX version that has texture and holographic. So it's like,
Right.
you know, what is that? You know, but it's very easy to understand some of the stuff. I think that's powerful.
Wow. Wow. You know, what's one thing I didn't even realize really was what you're talking about with the popularity aspect too. It's like there's that many more printed back in the day for Venusaur, and yet, like you said, it still holds, like, you know, in most respects, like a higher premium given the relative proportion of prints. And so that is like fascinating because we see the same kind of thing happening on VeVe, which I kind of screwed up on originally. I was chasing scarcity
Oh
because
no.
of what I saw in Pokemon. And I was like, oh my God, like for instance, your Rayquaza Gold Star, I was like, there's fewer of those that, especially at a PSA 10 that are graded. Like, you know, so if I'm getting the things that are really scarce off the bat, I should be making a lot of money. But what we noticed, it was like the opposite. Like you said, it was the things that were super popular that were cheap and people stacked. That's the people that made the most money. So if you know, for instance, back in the day, we're opening booster boxes and grading every Venusaur that you got in a first edition pack. I mean, damn, if you're, you know, you're up millions of dollars now, likely, right? So, and that's, some people were intuitive enough on VeVe to kind of see that well in advance. So that's fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I think the simplest way to put it, and I say this all the time, is you obviously, you know, any hobby is expensive. Any hobby is going to cost money, right? So, you know, make sure your rent's paid, make sure the roof's over your head.
Yeah.
But after that, realize that fortune favors the bold, and that you need to be greedy when others are fearful, and fearful when others are greedy. And we've seen that play out time and time again in the stock market, in the real estate market, in Pokemon, in automobiles, in vintage collectibles, you name it. That principle has by and large held true. I can't really see a situation where it wouldn't hold true for NFTs unless something about the marketplace fundamentally changes the way that we psychologically approach this stuff.
So interesting.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
Ryan, let me ask you, man, are you planning on selling this stuff off one day, or are you just going to keep accumulating and accumulating and be the Pokemon god? Yeah.
So my plans are like my evil plan to take over the world is actually really it's really interesting because so I mentioned at the very start that I spent about 70 grand on
Mhm.
some of this more vintage stuff, right? Like this card I paid $8,000 for. Um and I bought it from someone overseas, right? This box I paid $8,250 for, and it was a record selling sales price at the time for a private sale.
Wow.
In retrospect, what I want to do is I want to complete my EX booster box collection. There are 16 boxes in the era, and I currently own 13 of them. So what I would like to do is purchase the other three. And then after that, I have kind of like given myself a golden parachute. I'm going to, be a responsible adult. I have some collectibles that I'm using purely as leverage, right? So stuff that I've picked up has appreciated. I know I'm going to sell it, and I'm not only going to be able to recover my basis, but again, it's gone up 4 or 5 times. I'll be able to replenish and basically reduce my basis on my actual collection down to zero. At that point,
Mhm.
I'm gonna tie a knot on this stuff, and I'm gonna say, here's my vintage collection. Here's generational wealth for someone who doesn't care about it, who's probably in my family tree a couple generations down, right? Hopefully they all love and appreciate it. But my intention is to bring myself down to zero cost basis for this effectively, put that money away and call it a day. The other thing that I want to do after that is just continue to build sort of my presence in the community. So doing pack breaks, doing like live streams where we open up some more vintage stuff. Because in
Mhm.
addition to what you're seeing, obviously I have tons of like vintage packs and things of the sort. I'd love to one day be in a position to do that stuff more so for the fun of the hobby, right? More so than a profit making enterprise. But that's really my long-term plan, right? I want to keep the stuff that really means something to me, and everything else is either going to help me get to the collection that I want, or be something that can be, kind of like a hobby slash fun thing to do on the side.
Wow, brilliant. And it's so nice to see like a true collector. We have true collectors on VeVe as well that are literally holding this stuff because they love it and they
Of
enjoy
course.
it. They want to use it in augmented reality, et cetera. And they see, the potential for the application in the metaverse and what have you. So it's like nice to see that. And one question that I just want to throw at you and feel free to kind of shoot it down. But in my kind of experience, I was like, I wonder if these physical assets over time could potentially actually depreciate because they're just maybe less wanted, and NFTs, as we get more into the digital realm, become more sought after. And a lot of people would say that both, like, all ships will rise. Most people have that kind of feeling towards it, but how does that resonate with you? Like, what do you think? Like, do you feel very confident that these things that we're seeing right in front of us will continue to either be stable or appreciate in value long term?
So I would officially go on record as saying that I think all ships will rise, right? I think
Yeah.
there's a variety of reasons for that. And my primary one is that up till now, no one has effectively recreated anything you're seeing on screen as an NFT, right? And then I think the other interesting thing to think about is that especially in the space of Pokemon, every Pokemon itself is a creature, right? So if I'm looking at it from a forward facing compatibility type of view, I can imagine a situation where they take Rayquaza and they make it into a 3D model, right? As you mentioned, it's
Mhm.
something that can then be applied into the metaverse. It can be like a companion, right? Just like in the Pokemon video games. And
Mhm.
that's really, really cool if you think about it, right? I don't think they're going to go the route of recreating a box that you're then going to open up, right? And I think because of that, all ships have to rise because effectively, they would want the physical boxes. I think the other trick is that if I'm playing out a scenario where this sinks and that floats, I think it would have to be a case where people truly abandon the old schooled adage that you want to hold the card in your hand, right? Because the unlike NFTs where you get like, a statue of Elsa in a AR situation, and then you can kind of play around with it, you can view it from all angles. That originated truly on the blockchain. Inherently it is tied to the blockchain in some way, right? If they recreate this box as an NFT that you can open up and play around with, I think the one comparison folks will always make is that there's actually a physical version of this. I think the real benefit of NFTs is that you leverage some of these emerging technologies in really cool ways. Like I saw, for example, the comics, right? So like you can slap a comic down on this table and flip through it in the app in AR. And I think that's really cool, right? Obviously there are comics in real life too, but for someone who doesn't want to have this expansive collection of comics taking up a million spaces in their house, I think that's where the real applicability lies, right? So I think because the TCG has always kind of fundamentally been this tactile thing, where there's always going to be demand for this stuff because it inherently started as something we held in our hands. I think where NFTs will succeed is in utilizing the ancillary technology that sits around some of this stuff, like the AR, like the metaverse, like VR, to really kind of bring this card to life in a way that we never even thought possible.
Beautiful. And I think that's what a lot of people are kind of saying as well, as with like the utility and things that, physical collectibles can't really do yet. We talk about interoperability as well, being able to be into different, metaverses or gamification and all these different things that we could potentially, do with these NFTs. And I guess like on that note, with the trading card game, did that ever make a card more expensive because it had like, it could do more damage, or it could help your chances of winning in the trading card game? And is that what kind of originally it may have also added to like price points, or was it generally just based more on like what's rare, if it's hollow, etc.?
You see both. So especially in the modern market, for cards that come out on a given month, right? Those cards, playability drives price and demand by a lot. Sometimes you've opened up booster boxes before, so like the random trainers that you never pay attention to because they come right before. They're like, some of those trainers are incredibly easy to pull, and they go for 25 cents. And it doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're pulling, 10 or 12 of them in 36 packs, it's kind of funny, the cost disparity there, right? And obviously there are ultra versions of those cards that are going for $35-40, and the set is literally brand new. So playability does drive it, right? As I mentioned, this card too, it was a very playable card back in the day. As a result, what ended up happening is a lot of people put it in their deck, and we already know from the discussion that they weren't printing a lot of this stuff to begin with. So you had a lot of you had a low supply that got even lower because of how much it was used. And now looking back at it, there's demand on both sides. There's demand because it's a cool card. There's demand because it's a rare card. There's demand because it's a rare Pokemon. And there's demand because I want this card to play in my vintage Pokemon trading card deck.
Wow. Very cool, man. I mean, the insights that you're sharing right now are so great. Like I just keep making, like I keep going back to VeVe and be like, okay, how does this apply? How does this apply? um, so do you know who Alfred Kahn is? I'm just curious.
I've heard the name before, but let's pretend I didn't.
Okay, yeah. So he was basically, the major licensor, or the guy that basically took Pokemon from Japan and made it kind of North American. And so he's older now, but he's basically works for VeVe. And so because of that involvement, and because of David Yu, who's the CEO of VeVe, he's had like a lot of experience in the back selling Pokemon and et cetera. A lot of people are speculating that VeVe could be the place where Pokemon NFTs are dropped. I mean, and they tease us all the time. Like they had an AMA the other day and they're like, gotta catch them all,
That's funny.
Yeah. And we don't know, like there's no guarantee of any of this stuff. But if they did drop NFTs, like Pokemon NFTs on VeVe, would you go crazy, or would you kind of be like, I'd rather my physical collection for now?
I think one of the things that's really cool about Alex Kahn is that he brings a lot of market expertise, right? Like Back in the day, this was a huge thing in Japan, right? And it got isolated to just Asia Pac. When it breached the American markets, it was a huge deal, and he was fundamental in identifying something that not a lot of people realized at the time.
Mm.
And that's the idea that a pocket monster would be a hit with an American audience in a completely different country and culture from where it originally existed. I think, therefore, his involvement with VeVe is one of what I would consider to be the gold stars of the platform, right? The fact that in no uncertain terms, someone who already has a record of winning, like hitting it out of the park, has gotten involved with something that a lot of people have question marks around, right? So I can definitively say that I would jump in. I don't know if, and I'm just making this up right now, right? But if they make like models of Pokemon plus models of anime, like of anime scenes plus like actual booster boxes, but in AR, I don't know which I jump into first though. Like the one thing that's really cool is Pokemon's a multimedia franchise, right? So you could have video game models, you could have
Right.
trading card models, you could have booster pack models, like the variety of things that you could possibly put out there. And again, I don't think it's a coincidence that Alex is part of this process and probably a lot more influential than even the most knowledgeable of people know, because he's probably driving this, leveraging his past experiences.
Wow. Incredible. So yeah, so you would join us. You would join the party. That's good to know. Um,
100%.
Man, listen, I just wanted to first of all thank you for coming on. I know it's we just really wanted to pick your brain, man. I've been talking about you to my friends for a while. I've been, searching up your channel all the time. I like literally watch all your videos, and I was like, this guy is just so knowledgeable. And I felt like because of how analytical you are, I felt like you could merge, like you could understand the NFT and the physical gap, and kind of see how we can come up with some different ideas as how they kind of work together and work in parallels. So man, listen, like I would love to kind of have you back on from time to time, check out some of your cards. I mean, just seeing a $40,000 card in front of me, a $60,000 booster box, these are things that I've only ever seen in glass. And I don't know if I told you this, but back in the day, I did have a first edition Shadowless Charizard.
That's
Uh,
awesome.
yeah, it was a PSA 7, and I sold it. I don't even want to tell you what I sold it for at the time, but I sold it way early, and then that whole pump happened with Logan Paul, right?
Oh no.
Yeah. Um, and I guess before we go, Logan just bought that $5 million card that, and I know you did a video on that. Um, is that really $5 million? Is it 10 million now because it's on his neck, or what? How does that look?
It's actually 15 million because it's on his YouTube channel.
Oh, shit.
um so my for anyone who's checked out or watches my channel, I'm not a Logan Paul apologist, right? Like I think it only good things can come from someone like him coming into the hobby and really kind of shining an additional light. I certainly understand that there are concerns about supply and concerns about people getting into the hobby for the wrong reasons, i.e. everything is a price tag on screen and not about the love of the hobby. But one of the things I always say is like a lot of things got conflated with Logan, and specifically around the whole health pandemic as well, right? Like
Mhm.
we had supply chain issues that were shutting down production of trading cards. Like you can't blame him for something that there was simply no supply. So even though demand went up, how can you possibly argue the idea that, oh, demand's driven up because of him and that's a problem? Well, you should also probably equally give attention to the idea of supply. So I think he's made some large purchases. Obviously he's one of a few people that I know of, some are a little less loud, so to say, who will go through the process of making major acquisitions, oftentimes fueled by big money that either came from, in Logan Paul's case, his social media presence, and in other cases, big winners on crypto, right? And I think
Right.
in either case, what I've noticed is people are willing to spend money. And I think psychologically, that fundamentally adds to the foundation of this hobby. It's something no one's willing to talk about because no one wants to sound like they're supporting, you know, some monstrous rich person coming in and buying up our hobby. At the end of the day, I know the stuff on this table, I'm not selling it to him no matter how hard he comes at me, you know, unless he's buying me the house and the other 3 boxes, he's not getting what's on the table. And you know, that's just the genuine truth of it. And there's also the argument that at the end of the day, you know, we hang up the Zoom call, I get to enjoy my collectibles for a little bit, right? I'm not going back to the safety deposit box till tomorrow. So yeah, I'm going to take a look at them. I'm going to appreciate them. Then I'll send them back where they need to go so they're safe. At the end of the day, if he makes a $5 million purchase, I certainly didn't lose any money from that. More importantly, it adds rebar and concrete to the foundation upon this hobby, because we know for a fact someone's willing to spend 5 million, and all of a sudden 45,000 or even 100,000 for this one doesn't seem like that much. And that's how we see a hobby genuinely continue to grow.
Wow. And so was I mistaken then? You said that that box is $100,000 for that booster box?
Oh, no. 60 as of its most recent sale price. But I mean to say, you know, like
If it
all of a
accumulates.
sudden, yeah, like this 60 like can go to 100,000 now, right? Because by its inherent nature, if there's a $5 million card out there, there's got to be something worth 100, right?
Exactly. And like, you know, when you bought that for 8, it went to 60 as an example, right? So it's like
Exactly.
the same iteration already happened. Why can't it happen again? Especially if there's a higher interest in more sales data, etc.
Yeah. And just to give you something to laugh at, I was
Yeah.
arguing with the guy I bought this box from because I needed to buy another $8,000 box, and I was tempted to turn the deal down because of $250. So it just goes to show you, like, sometimes it's about the long-term bigger picture here.
I bet you he was like so pissed off about that still. He's like, damn.
Oh, when the box sold, he sent me a whole bunch of messages. He was like, oh man, you really are something. I'm like, yeah, but you got to take the risk, right? And that's sometimes how it goes.
Wow. Such a cool story, man. So folks, if you haven't checked out the Analytic Gengar, make sure to go check it out, man. This is like, again, my favorite Pokemon channel. That's like no cap, hands down. You know, Ryan breaks down everything about Pokemon in extreme detail, you know, gives you the analysis that nobody else can, and really just has like an in-depth way of thinking. And it's just like very cool to see a lot of the stuff that he has as well. Sometimes I just like to, you know, watch it for fun, just on my pastime on, you know, when I'm cooking dinner or whatever, I'll throw it up on YouTube. But dude, listen, man, you know, this is actually a lot more insightful than even I imagined. I was already, you know, had big expectations for you. So I really, really, you know, appreciate you coming on. Would love to have you back again soon, and would kind of love to have you, you know, somewhat involved with the community where people can, you know, pick your brain and ask questions. And then we already have, you know, a lot of people in here that have collected Pokemon and are pretty good at it. Like I know like Randy Chavez and another one of my buddies, Mark, who's on here, and other people that are like all over Twitter. I'm sure would kind of like love to kind of, you know, pick your brain. So if you haven't done so already, go to subscribe to his channel. You could also find him on Instagram and then also on Twitter. And I will leave all those links in the description below. So Ryan, thanks again, man. It means a ton to me.
Yeah, thank you for having me on again. If I haven't said it enough, thank you for, you know, remaining consistent and definitely connecting with me. I greatly appreciate it. Obviously, tons of fun discussing this stuff with you. It's rare to, you know, meet someone who's genuinely interested and genuinely thinking about this stuff. So, you know, I had a great time. Again, thank you so much for having me, and I hope to see, you know, a few folks come over. Would definitely love to have you. We'll, you know, we do videos three times a week, assuming I'm human enough to make 3 videos in a given week. And otherwise, you know, giveaways, funny random jokes, you know, we have it all. So definitely feel free to come through. And Chad, I'm definitely sending you some Pokemon cards. We're going to do a good old fashioned pack battle, get you to be a PokeTuber for a day too.
Ooh, dude, that sounds amazing. I was hoping for something. I was like, I'm not going to say anything. That's so cool, dude.
No, we definitely got to do it.
Awesome, man. Okay, well, thanks so much for coming on again. And I know people are going to love this, dude.
No worries. Thanks.